Hello everyone, my name is Mirna, and on behalf of the Mindalia TV team, welcome to Mindalia live streaming, where thousands of people around the world gather daily to see the lectures and interviews organized by Mindalia TV. Today with us, we have the great pleasure of having our dear Sunny Chase. Sunny is not only the host of this show, but she is the host of ABC Solutionary Sunday. She is a chief strategist for the Whole Lifetime magazine, the longest running conscious life magazine in America. Sunny is a producer, a moderator, and a myth buster. We're going to be having a great chat with Mr. Stephen Post. Sunny, welcome to Mindalia. What a pleasure to have you with us today.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm so excited to be with you. We've had a little bit of a hiatus and we're back. We're fresh. We're here with Pioneers of Possibility, and have a beautiful pioneer today. I mean, for real. And so how are you doing with all of these things going on in the world and everything? How are you faring down in Florida and just everything?
Doing great. Also, after this hiatus, we spent a couple of weeks without being able to meet, but back on track and happy to have you.
Thank you, thank you. Well, there's so much going on in the world. We have so much happening with our crazy, crazy weather, which of course was predicted by scientists 20 years ago, and now we're experiencing it, which is affecting so many people around the world. And we have so many painful situations that are happening. And then we also have the solution built in, as we know. We do have the solution built into these problems. And the guest I'm having today is, I read so many books. His name is Stephen Post. And I read so many books because of what we do. I have so many books sent to me. And a lot of them are sort of how-to books these days. And it just wears me out because I want stories. I want to read a story. I want to go on a journey. I want to immerse myself. And I also want spiritual practices to be woven in. Like The Alchemist. I want a bunch of books like The Alchemist, if at all possible. And so this book that Stephen wrote is called God and Love on Route 80. And I didn't even know that Route 80, I used to live in San Francisco and I had quite a relationship with Route 80. It's a, thoroughfare. It's like a freeway, highway. And I didn't realize it went all across from one end of the United States all the way to the other. I never knew that. So it's this like thread that goes all the way 3,000 miles. And so Stephen wrote a book about it and weaves in so many serendipitous moments and spiritual practices. But the main thing that I so appreciated about this book, over so many that I've read, and not that it's a competition, but kind of the gratitude and the humility and the wonder that he has. And he calls himself the boy through the whole book, even though he turns from a boy to a man, but he stays with this feeling of the boy. And I love that because it just keeps that curiosity, that wonder, that awe, that wanting to know more, wanting to be open to new possibilities, and new opportunities and new ways of looking at things and new ways of doing things. And so I am really, really excited to have the first pioneer to be Stephen, because he is indeed a pioneer. And I'd love you to bring him on, but I want to say a couple things about him before I let him speak. Or he can say hi to us, and I want to give him a little bit of an edification. But can we bring him on to our show? Hello, Stephen G. Post.
Welcome to Mindalia, Stephen. Let's go ahead and bring you. This is your home. I'm going to be leaving you guys the screen so you can have the best conversation.
Thank you. Hello, Stephen. How are you?
Hello, Sunny. I'm very fine. I'm glad to be talking with you and all of your wonderful listeners.
Well, guys, I want you to know that Stephen, I mean, there's so many sort of accolades and labels and awards and everything that I can say, accomplishments that Stephen has done. But what I would just say, I'll just use some adjectives and we can fill it in as we go. I mean, he has many degrees and he's worked with some of the highest level, if we can say, curious minds in the world. He has had the greatest opportunity by being open and saying yes to his journey, to his journey on Route 80. That's taken him to meet and to be able to work with the youngest of people, the oldest of people, people in what we may call dementia, and he has new terms for that, which I think is so great. He's done so many fascinating things with underprivileged people, with people who may be sort of thrown away in our society. He gathers them up and he brings them and he honors them, and it just fills me with tears to even say this. And so, again, God and love on Route 80, the hidden mystery of human connectedness. I mean, need we say more? So, but we will say more. So, Stephen, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for gracing us.
Well, it's a delight. I'm really looking forward to it.
I would love for you, if you would, one of the things that I found so amazing in this book, and I know our audience will love this, is if you would like to go ahead and start with your dream.
Okay, that's fine, Sonny. So this is a very personal journey. When I was a young boy, I went up to a boarding school, call it a slightly pricey orphanage, in Concord, New Hampshire. It was called St. Paul's. And I was 15. I used to love sacred studies. I would always read a lot of philosophy. I loved to read Jung. I had great teachers, one of whom was a fellow named Rod Wells, who was a great friend of Alan Watts, the Buddhist. So I had, in my 15th year, a dream that recurred a half a dozen times. And this was very vivid. It would take place early in the morning, and I wasn't quite sure if I was sleeping or awake. It was kind of betwixt and between. And in a nutshell, I would see a gray, silvery mist that was very thick, and it seemed to be pointing down a road to the west, but I had no idea where. There was a ledge that looked out over the sea, and a youth with stringy blonde hair who seemed to be about ready to jump. And then the mist disappeared, and there was a blue angel. I was not a big believer in angels, by the way, at the time. And it said to me in a feminine voice, very softly, "If you save him, you too shall live." And that was it. And then, we had required chapel every morning at 8. So on those mornings, I'd typically go early and I'd sit in my favorite wooden pew and kind of meditate on those words. If you save him, you too shall live. And I had no real sense of what those meant. But over time, I would gain a lot of insight, because eventually I really did go west following the dream, and some wonderful things happened.
So I want to, I'm going to tell the story a little bit as we go along as well, because I did read your full book and I remember it very well. And so, as can happen with the hero's journey, often a young man can have an issue with the parents and need to break free or break through, or both. And so you had an experience like that, and you decided to leave your land in the east, and you had this car, and you started driving on Route 80. And just when you were thinking, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't go any farther, what am I doing? What in the hell? You really had the idea in your mind to literally take your car and turn around and go back.
Right.
And at that moment, your car, broke down. So it was the universe saying, no, young whippersnapper, you are not meant to go back. You're meant to go forward. And so, there are charming aspects in the book about how you left a note and the car got back to your parents, but you ended up getting you ended up hitchhiking with a complete angel, back in the day when it was safer to hitchhike. And that started your journey west. So that, and then many other things happened, but you did get to San Francisco. And then I would love for you to just tell us what happened on the bridge.
Well, yeah, so I had a cousin named George Lamont who lived on Chenery Street in the Mission District. He let me sleep on his floor in an apartment building over the summer. And I was playing classical guitar, villalobos and granados in Hispanic restaurants, earning my pocket change. And I was doing some chanting at the Nichiren Shosho Buddhist temple on Market and Chenery, so Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and I really enjoyed it.
Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.
I loved it, and unfortunately, I didn't plan to go to college. I decided I was not going to do that because I had no great reason for it. I drew a very bad draft number, so I called the people at Reed College, which is a school in Portland, Oregon, and I said, look, I know I turned you down, but I really need a break, so can you put me in the entering class? And they said, sure. So one early September morning, in front of the temple with and a Japanese-American mentor for me, an old fellow named Gus, and my cousin George, and people from the temple, I left. I took the Market Street bus to Golden Gate Park. I walked across the park, which is a bit of a walk. It's probably 10 or 15 minutes. And I walked up the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, it's early in the morning. It's probably 7:30. Maybe it's 7:45. And there's a lot of heavy mist. I really couldn't see more than 4 or 5 feet in front of my nose. I was on the left walkway. And in the middle of the bridge, there's a little railing area. And I looked over because I heard some shuffling. And I saw an image that looked a lot like a blonde-haired youth on a ledge about ready to jump. And I looked at him and I said, I truly hope you're not planning to jump. And he reacted to me, said, what's it to you? And he even quoted some Macbeth, some Shakespeare about life being empty nothingness. And I told him, I feel that way too. I guess I could be out on the ledge and you could be here. And I said, those words sound a lot more powerful when you're about to jump than they did in Memorial Hall at St. Paul's School when we used to do that play. And we went back and forth a little bit. And then I said, look, I truly hope you don't jump. And if you can believe this, I think I came all the way across the country. I think I had a dream as a 15-year-old, which was 2 years ago. I think I had an argument with my parents about working that summer. They wouldn't let me work in the Bronx as a tutor. They had me working in Bill DeBono's lampshade factory. And it was not the best experience. And I'd taken my dad's secondhand gray Mercedes 190 and left it in the middle of Pennsylvania on Route 80 with a sign to the Pennsylvania State Police, please return to Henry Post, 44 Davison Lane, East West Islip, from his son who no longer works in the lampshade factory. Well, I told him the whole story, and he was mesmerized by it. I probably took 10 minutes, and I was really trying to engage him in a positive way, and he really took to it. And then I said, look, if you step over this railing and come on my side, I'm going to give you something that's going to change your luck forever. So he said, what is it? I said, it's a Gohon zone. A Gohon zone is a Japanese Buddhist scroll. It's kind of a good luck thing, but it's deeper than that because it has lots of beautiful writing and symbols on it about infinite mind, about one mind, about the original mind, and about how we are more connected than we often are thinking we are. And I said, look, if you come over here, I will give this to you. and I'll explain it. I'll give it to you, but there's one condition. So he said, okay. He walked over. He walked over the railing, and I explained it all to him in detail. And then I said, okay, you have to take this Cajon zone. This is your good luck charm, and you've got to walk down Golden Gate Bridge toward Golden Gate Park, because I was going north toward Oregon. And I gave him a note to my cousin George, 4 Chenery Street. This is Harry. Please let him sleep on the floor where I slept. Bring him down to the temple. Introduce him to Gus. Let him get involved in spirituality and so forth, and try to take care of him. And so apparently that all worked out. And I said, we shook hands. We actually chanted a little bit, looking out over the water from the top of the bridge there. And I felt somehow, again, that there was this incredible mystery to my having met Harry on the bridge, because again, it was thousands of miles away, and it was beyond temporality, because it had been a couple of years since the dream. And suddenly I began to figure out that, hey, maybe the dream was a really profound premonition, and maybe there's a lot more to a cherishing infinite mind in the universe than we really like to admit to or think about in our materialistic world. And I walked down the bridge going north, and put my thumb out, and there was a truck that came along, and a guy picked me up. He said, "Hey boy, where are you going?" I said, "Oregon." He said, "Well, I can get you most of the way. My name's Dill, D-I-L-L, Dwayne Dill, and this is my wife Dorothy." And we just drove along, and it was great. But that was where the dream began to make some real sense to me, because up until that point, I just really had no idea.
Well, I'd love to say, first of all, a couple things. I was making some notes as I was listening to you. And the first thing is that you saved someone's life. And that's not the first, I mean, that was the first time, but it wasn't the last time. But right. The truth is that many people, I used to live in San Francisco and in Marin, and I know that bridge very well. And there's been very much, energy about kind of how to structure the bridge so that people don't jump off it, because it's such a, sort of romantic, quote unquote, place to end people's lives. It really has a pull for people who want to do that. And of course, we don't want that to happen. So there was so much energy about how to make it harder for people to actually jump. At that time, when you were doing, when you had this experience with this young man, Harry, it was pretty easy. I mean, you could just jump.
Yes.
So you had this dream, and I mean, what I feel about it when the notes I was writing down was that, with the car situation, with many different things that happened, it was sort of like there was this underlying, you sort of saying yes to things. And I often use the analogy that we're on kind of a kayak in a river in life. And we can either paddle, or we can get stuck on the side, or we can, sometimes there are rapids ahead. And so we have to really be laser focused and not talk to anybody and just be on our own and get through it. And sometimes we can be leisurely and, maybe have other people in the kayak with us. But I feel like that whole opportunity, and just the, one might call it luck, but it's like, I was just writing down the word gratitude, and I was thinking that anybody listening to this show right now or watching this show can look at their life. I mean, Stephen, when you talk about the route of 80 and, going from one place to another geographically, but also emotionally, spiritually, financially, in community, with your education. I mean, so many aspects of our life, health-wise, everything that is part of our journey in our life. And I'm just thinking, gosh, we can look at different moments in our life where, like Dorothy, on the yellow brick road, do I turn left or do I turn right? And the scarecrow is sort of like, well, you can turn left or right. You can turn left or right. It's like, girl, it's up to you. What are you going to do? And I think that we have so many of those moments in our lives, even every day, we can feel like, should I go to that event or should I stay home and be safe? And I just feel like having the gratitude for all the choices we've made in our life, all the way up to this moment on September 12th, actually. This show is on September 12th, which is the day after 9/11. So it's a day of honoring all of what came together in our country the day after a disaster in our world. The gratitude for every choice we've ever made bringing us to this moment. And then really appreciating our openness to saying yes to things. So that's sort of what I get from everything up to the bridge.
So I don't believe we make our lives. It's a very arrogant idea to think that we do. We're on a journey, and hopefully we respond with love and creativity and some wisdom to all the wonderful, unexpected people who we encounter. And when I was at Reed, I actually took a course on quantum physics and the history of medieval science, which was all about alchemy and these kinds of deeper views of reality. It was great. But the funny thing, when the generator in the cars have generators those days, was just as I was about to do a U-turn and go home and restore my reputation, that the generator broke. Everything just went black in a moment. And I got over on the shoulder and I wrote that note to the Pennsylvania State Police. And then I was on my way. And I just even felt in retrospect that, what happened with the car was just part of the universe kind of pushing me westward and for this encounter on a bridge that really shaped my life, because after that, I never felt I was circling down into some negative vortex of emptiness and nothingness. I always felt that even if I'd have some difficult moments in life, and everybody does, that somewhere down Route 80, awaiting me, there was this wonderful kind of uncanny synchronicity, and I would be able to expand the canvas, if you will, from something kind of difficult into something really beautiful. And that's how I've lived my life.
And indeed you have. And one thing I would love to have for us to chat about, just to get to some of your wisdom that you've amassed over your not very many years, obviously, but somehow you've packed it in. And you really have. I mean, when I read this book, every 9 or 10 pages, I think, wow, that could be a full book in itself. One thing I'd love to have us chat about is it's good to be good. I love that term that you came up with. And one of the things, guys, I will tell you about Steve, I want to call you Dr. Steve. I don't know if you have a doctorate, but you...
I do, but Stephen is fine. Yeah, my doctorate is from the University of Chicago Divinity School, and I quit a career in science at UPenn, and I went there following the dream. And I like to say that, I would sit there with Mirsha Eliade and Joseph Campbell, who was there for a year when I was there. And I explained my Blue Angel dream. I explained the car on Route 80. And Joseph Campbell said synchronicity, not luck. He was very dapper. And Eliade, who had these big tufts of hair coming out his ears and was all hunched over, he asked me, is it all synchronicity? And we would have these wonderful conversations about journeys in Route 80. And those were great people.
Well, you have lived a magical life, and the concept. So again, you know many studies, and I think it's absolutely fascinating about what we can actually, what Harvard and Stanford and many schools in our country, let alone Germany and other countries, have done studies on some of the coolest things, like how, what happens to people when they do good. I mean, it feels like just a natural thing that our parents taught us when we were young. And that actually brings me to the point that I want to really dive into with It's Good to Be Good. One thing that you chatted with me about, which I found fascinating, was that, and I know this myself, and Myrna, I think you're going to really appreciate this, that we as a people, especially in the Western world, we have a tendency of really making a point of teaching our children when they're little baby, little kids, to share, to be good, to be kind, to be lovely with their friends, to have good manners with their aunties and uncles and their little brothers and sisters, and to gather the people and don't leave anyone out, and all these kinds of things that we teach kids in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. And then at a certain point, which I didn't actually realize that place of demarcation until you and I spoke about it, Steve, but you were mentioning that at about 13, there's this, in some cultures in America, or some financial demographics, it really becomes very competitive, to get into the best school and to really get ahead in whatever the business might be, and, to just go for yourself and kind of not be so paying attention to your friends and to your community and to your family and to doing good. But it's about getting those grades, taking violin lessons, going to piano camp or whatever it is. And so there's this time where that separates, and that's not a good thing. It's so great for us to stay with that, to bridge that gap, to bridge that bridge, to smooth out that bridge. And as parents, we're in a moment right now, I love to give you permission, all of you parents out there, keep that going. Yes, it's great to get into a nice college or to get into a good art school or whatever. But at the end of our lives, and I can say that because I have a 29-year-old, having kids, raising people who are so connected with their friends, who really are invested in their relationships and with being kind to others. Guys, I'm just going to tell you, it pays off, and that makes me teary too. But I'm at the other side of it, so I can say I see the difference. And yes, they're also successful and they're making money. Thank the God above. But so I wanted to chat a little bit about the studies and the different things you know about that.
Well, having circles of kindness is really what matters in life. And when you look back later on, that's what will bring you flourishing and a feeling of gratification. When I was at St. Paul's, a lot of those guys went on. It was a boys' school at the time. They went on to Ivy League institutions, and people asked me, why did I even apply to read, because no St. Paul's kids did. And I said, well, it's the dream. They also had Robert Bly teaching poetry there, and he was a Jungian and a musician, and I thought that was probably worth all the tea in China. But there's a lot of research now on how to raise a kind child, and it's really quite impressive. If you have a sort of a family mission statement where all the kids and the parents or parent come together and they figure out the 5 or 6 core values that they want to define their culture as a family, kindness, trust, loyalty, respect, and so forth. And you tack that up in the kitchen on, say, the refrigerator door. And whenever there's a spat, an issue that comes up, instead of browbeating or yelling or screaming, you convene around your mission statement. And you can improvise a little bit and you can improve that over time. But the studies show that really works in terms of raising a kind child. And also when families do some volunteering together, so they pick their interest that really kind of floats their boat. Maybe it's the local Alzheimer's chapter, or maybe it's something with the homeless or whatever, but they do this together for just an hour or two a week. That does a lot. And of course, good empathic role modeling. So there are really ways to raise a kind child, and we're learning a lot about those now. It's so important. And the major thing is that if you stick with it, which is what you're saying, if you really stick with it, Sonny, it will shine a protective halo over your child's whole life. Because of this great study, actually my institute co-funded in a retrospective analysis. It occurred about 1929 at Berkeley with 100 kids from the Bay Area, 12-year-olds, and they asked them, so what motivates you? And 100 of them said, I want to use my talents to help humanity, and 200 didn't. Then they followed these kids every 10 years over the whole course of their life, and they found that those first 100 had this giver's heart, this give and glow mentality, They were shielded from depression, from vascular disease, a number of other things. And now there are only about 45 or 50 of them who are still alive. But astonishingly, about 2/3 of the ones who are still living come from the 1/3 who, as 12-year-olds, said, I want to use my talents to contribute to others. And of course, this is just a scientific generalization. There are lots of them who may have had a tragic accident at a young age or terminal diagnosis, but as a gross generalization, which is all science can give us, it's going to be good. And if you start them young and you acculturate them to this, then they will live more fulfilling, flourishing lives and even longer lives. And that's a beautiful thing.
Well, what I love about that is that, again, so yes, I mean, the study showed, like you're saying, that they had much higher levels of health, happiness, even financial growth or financial stability, many, many aspects of the outer life that we wish for our kids. You know, we want all those things. And again, the community. And of course, there are many studies showing with young people, with old people, with many different kinds of people, the community is what basically keeps us alive, and especially healthy community, obviously. And one thing that I wanted to say when I was listening to you talk is that, again, as a mom, many, many years, I've been a mom for a few years, and some of the things that I've heard over the years that it's disappointed me is that people often don't have very high expectations for children or for young people. Or these days it's sort of like, I mean, I think of that song from many years ago. It dates me. I was probably 5 when it came out, but what's the matter with kids today? And that was a song that came out in the 60s. But, sort of people speak like that now, it's like they're all on their iPad and iPhone and all that. And I beg to differ, because what I see is I see so many kids. I mean, I'm in the world of Make a Difference, so I see 9-year-old kids who are doing things. I see 9, 10, 11-year-olds who are having their parents and working with their parents to change laws in their schools and how food is served and the health of the food and not using straws or single-use plastics, or like Felix Finbein in Germany, who at 9 years old started planting trees, and he's 19 or 20 now, and they've in Germany planted 1 billion trees in other places. I mean, there are so many examples. Tezcat Martinez, who started at 6 years old to be talking with a microphone about saving our planet, and he's now just rocking it. With Earth Guardians. He's Inca and Mexican, and phenomenal person. So I guess what I'm saying, guys, again, I speak to you parents out there, is we can have great high expectations for our kids. They're not just little kids that need to eat Twinkies and play jump rope and whatever people think. It's just not true. There's so much they can do, and there's so much sacred and spiritual life that they live. I mean, often they're living that life, and it may be quiet, it may be a life that they're living with, as they're playing, as they're coloring, as they're playing with their dolls, or they're doing art, or they're doing whatever, but they're having a sacred life that they may not even feel comfortable chatting with us about, because they may think we don't know what's up. But I mean, let's give them permission. Let's open the channels. Let's allow for an awesome life for our little kids. Let's expect the best of them. Shall we? Do I hear an amen out there?
So, I agree completely with that. Some people say, well, this is a narcissistic generation. That science is actually very questionable. Bottom line, you can go back to the 1920s, and about half of kids are very generous, very altruistic in their motivations, and about half less so. Now, a light may go on, hopefully it will, a little later in life, it usually does. But things have not changed now. I think you see this incredible creativity among the young, generous entrepreneurs like the ones you just mentioned. They're absolutely unbelievable. And I have to tell you, I've been teaching in medical schools for 30 years, Chicago, Ann Arbor, 20 years, Case, Stony Brook. Our students now are the most generous, kind, empathic I've ever seen. And they're so committed to hanging on to that in their careers. They are not going to compromise that. And they were talking yesterday about how they're going to strategize and make sure that they can create a culture of compassion across the whole medical center. So this is a beautiful thing. And even Paul Bloom at Yale in the Child Studies Center, he has shown that even toddlers, say ages 1 to 1.5, if you show them a puppet show with uh, a generous, helpful puppet and one that is kind of a mean jack, 90% of them will reach out afterwards independently. So there's no group think, and they'll gaze at or reach toward or touch the helper puppet. And so it's there very early on. The question is, what buttons do we push and what communities do we create in order to allow them to flourish in their natural goodness? And spirituality is a part of that, certainly. So we just have to have confidence in our own good nature and in the possibility of connecting with a love that is greater than our own human love, because I acknowledge that human love can be unwise and myopic and unstable and so forth. But that's what spirituality is about. It's about enlivening and enlarging something that we really have deeply within us. And there's no reason to be jaded and cynical about all of this.
No, and one thing I would love for you to speak about, thank you for that. And again, I just love the idea that we can, when we're with our kids, whether we're parents or we're aunties or we're in a school situation or we're just at a park or we see someone, the encouragement, the idea that all is great, all is possible. There's so many studies. I mean, there are even people who are working, kids who have drug addictions or different kinds of challenges, working with animals, working with other kids, giving, and then seeing the difference it makes. It's just the studies are everywhere. And one thing I would love for you to chat about, because there's so many things that you've done in your life, and I want to promote you today. One thing I would love for you to chat about is the UN letters competition that you did, and that's in the book too, so you guys can read more about it. But I'd love to dovetail into that right now.
Can I just say one thing about kids? So the strongest predictor that a young person will not abuse alcohol or other substances, including opioids, is whether they have a strong sense of purpose in life. They study better, they get better grades. This has been demonstrated time and time again. If they're not just studying for themselves, but they have some needful constituency that they identify with. It's absolutely valid that you do better when you're thinking not just about the self and the problems of the self and the anxieties of the self, but thinking about others. And so it's incredibly protective. And by the way, these new studies show that the single predictor, the strongest predictor that an elderly adult will not have a decline in memory is whether they have a strong sense of purpose as they grow older. So purpose and higher motivations are so important. But the UN thing, so, I had this Blue Angel dream as a kid, and I think we need to take adolescent spirituality more seriously than sometimes we do, and also inherent goodness. So after I finished at the University of Chicago, I went to Ann Arbor for a couple of years and taught medical humanism and compassionate care there. And I took a job for 3 years at Fordham University, Marymount in Tarrytown, looking out over the Tappan Zee Bridge. It was really lovely. And I had an office mate, Gabe Gomez, who's still alive. And Gabe asked me, so how did you get into, world religions and spirituality? And I said, well, when I was 15, I had this dream, and I had this experience 3,000 miles away, and other experiences. So I just believe that we're a lot more connected than we sometimes allow ourselves to speak about, And so he said, "Oh my goodness, you've got to go to Peconico Hills, which is the next town behind Tarrytown along the Hudson there, and that's where the Rockefeller family has its enclave, and there's a famous church there. It's called the Union Presbyterian Church. It's a stone church. And Nelson Rockefeller was a big modern art fan, so he had Matisse, but he also had Chagall do all the beautiful stained glass windows of the prophets. And it was very Kabbalistic. And also, the back of the church is one big, huge blue stained glass image of the Good Samaritan. You've got blue angels coming in and out, and all kinds of symbols from all the spiritual traditions of the world. It was so beautiful and so integrative. And so I said to myself, here's a guy who seems to think that blue is the color of love, as did I somehow. And so I began to study Chagall. And actually, he did write that blue is the color of love. And the story is that when he was 17, the same age when I was working in Bill DeBono's lampshade factory, he had an argument with his mom and dad because they wanted him to be sticking at home in the factory pickling herring. But he thought he had a different destiny, so he went off to St. Petersburg. He had nothing. He lived on the streets. He sketched. He hadn't painted yet. And then one night, and this is in a book he wrote about his own life maybe 10 years later called My Life, he's in an alley. And there's a little bit of a roof over a mattress, and he's on the mattress with an old handy worker, and it's early in the morning, and lo and behold, he sees the whole alleyway fill with a blue light, and he just can't believe it. He doesn't know if he's asleep or awake. It's very spiritual. He's about 17 at the time, and then the blue ascends, but he sees the fluttering wings of an angel, of a bluish angel. And then the angel leaves, and the next day he painted his first picture, and it's called The Apparition, and it's a painting of a blue angel. And all of his work, whether it's in the UN or the Chicago Art Institute or in Peconico Hills, he loved the color blue. And when he died, he was in a suburb of Paris in a studio painting a blue angel. So I got so into it, I actually wrote a couple of articles about Chagall, and I got invited in 2014. Now I've been at Stony Brook for 6 years to give a talk at the Union Church. And I gave a talk about this incredible spirituality of Chagall that we have yet to realize, but if we do, it's going to be a great new universe that we live in. Love of neighbor, love of self, love of nature, a beautiful thing. And I came back that night, drove over the Throgs Neck Bridge, got back to Stony Brook, go to my computer, and I have an email from Duray Ahmad, who's a world-famous Muslim feminist mystic who lives in Lahore, Pakistan. And she's on the board of my Institute for Research on Unlimited Love, which Sir John and I had started. And she said the website's been taken down. And there was this flag. It was Team DZ ISIS, and it was the ISIS flag. And I was really startled by it. So in the book, you see her email and the email from my webmaster, Ned Barrett, just because they were taken by it as well. And then we thought, so what will we do? I met with our board, and we decided to have an international essay contest where we would invite young people in different age categories, as young as 12, but no older than 21, to write existential, sort of gut-level essays about how they push back against peer pressure to hate other people just because they didn't share their beliefs. We got thousands, we did have cash prizes, by the way. We got thousands of these beautiful essays, and we reviewed them. We had an international committee. And so lo and behold, in August of 2016, on World Youth Day, we were invited to be the featured event, and we filled the entire UN headquarters with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young people from all over the world. And they came, and many of them, the winners certainly, they performed their essays. Some of it was rap and some of it was theatrics, but they performed their essays. And it was piped out via the UN system to 80 million young people worldwide. I thought, that's expanding the canvas. I like to me is like a Jackson Pollock painting. I mean, when he puts that lob of paint down on the ground in the middle, it doesn't look like a whole heck of a lot. But the whole thing is he covers it with so many beautiful, dynamic, energetic lines and shapes and forms that in the end it's a thing of beauty. And so I even consider being hacked in that way by Team DZI ISIS. I did talk with the FBI about it briefly, by the way, so it's somewhere in their note system. But that was even synchronicity, because it gave me an opportunity to do something that I never imagined. I had no idea at all of ever doing something like that, but it just worked out beautifully.
Well, thank you for that story. And in a few minutes, I know we're coming to a close, so I want to make sure we get everything in. But I just want to wrap my arms around the story that you just told, because what you're talking about is, again, an opportunity out of something that's completely disastrous. I mean, ISIS found your website because it was all about the love, and it was all about the children, and it was all about boistering up people of all ages, and they did not like that, so they literally took it down. They erased it. They put a black mark on it, like you say, and then from that, you gave the opportunity to thousands of kids to sit down at their table with a pen and a paper and say, how am I in my community going to push back? And to go very deep and to say, first of all, do I want to push back? I mean, even to get to that place, it's like, wow, this opportunity from the UN, from Stephen Post, from the universe, is asking me the question in my community, in my school, in my classroom, with my friends, when we go to the mall. Am I going to be the one to push back? Is that my job? Is that my duty? Is that my calling? Right. And then they say yes, and then they write an essay about it. So, and then some people got prizes, some people didn't, but then they all came together. You had thousands of them in the same room. And so they're all with a tribe of people who are saying, I'm not going to take this kind of thing. I'm not going to allow this kind of thing. And so when you're saying again about the children, just kind of our theme, it feels like this whole show about it's good to be good. It's like you gave them the opportunity just to make a stand in their life, in their home, in their moment in time, in that place, to say no to something and yes to something else. And so I feel like that was such a gift to our world. And I thank you so much for doing that among all the 150 other things that you've done that are as big as that, if not bigger.
Well, I still do the youth essay contest now each year. So we have a website called loveallmeansall.org, or loveallmeansall.org. And we just concluded another essay contest, got lots of responses. We're managing the outcomes right now, but we want to do it annually. And the thing is, just to reemphasize, as you've done, Sonny, that you want to give young people an opportunity to reflect deeply through journaling, through writing, on what really matters to them, what their mission statement is, if you want to get back to that idea. Mm-hmm. And we do that in the medical school. We have the students writing beautiful essays on role models of empathic and compassionate care that really inspired them. And then also, how do they respond when they see a negative role model, somebody who says a derisive joke within earshot of a patient? It happens at the end of the day when teams are tired. So they learn a lot from the negative, and they also learn a lot from all the little details of the positive, the fine things, facial expression, tone of voice, how their cadence worked out, and how they seemed to somehow have a affective presence that wasn't just cognitive. And so we let them speak about this and talk about this. And the nice thing is that it's such an emphasis here that, our students, when they go into residencies, a very high proportion of them are invited to become chief residents, because they have that extra element, which is kindness. And that's what we need to do. That's what the medical system needs. It needs kindness.
Yes. And it is good to be good, you guys. And now I know we're coming to the end. At this point, we are going to probably do another show with you, a part B at some point. But until next time, again, I want to show people the book and God and Love on Route 80. And then on the back, it also says, God is whispering to you. Can you hear it? And I really love that. And so I want to uh, ask you, I know people can get to you at, it is stephenpost.com, is that right?
Oh, well, it's Stephen G. Post, Stephen with a PH,
Okay.
gpost.com, or
And guys, reach
unlimitedloveinstitute.org.
Oh, perfect. And again, I want to, I know you guys know where to get to me, but you can get to me. I'm Sunny Chase. It's spelled Chayes on Instagram, and on YouTube. You can just go on YouTube and check out the webs, all the different shows I've done, and go to Mindalia Music, and I have one video there, and there will be many more coming up. So definitely, guys, check out Mindalia Music. And I would love to end this show with again saying, God is whispering to us, and let us hear it. Let us hear it. That is my wish and prayer for all of you guys today. And, be the pioneers of possibility in your own life, because I know we all are that. That's what we do. So until next time, this is Sunny. And Myrna, I know you want to come on and say bye-bye too.
Thank you so much for allowing the Mindalia TV cameras to be a channel for your words, for your ideas, for your wisdom. We are truly honored. And to our audience, of course, as always, we are very thankful for you. Remember liking, subscribing, not only to this channel, but also to Mindalia TV, Televisión in Spanish, and Televisao in English. Again, thank you for being with us. And thank you, Sunny. Thank you, Stephen. And until next time, we're sending a very, very big hug from our heart to yours. And see you soon. Bye.